I never imagined that moving into a peaceful suburban enclave would spark a clash of epic proportions over solar panels. My name is Sebastian Ridgewood, though most people don't realize I'm the billionaire founder and CEO of Greenstar Innovations, one of the world's largest renewable energy companies. After years of relentless travel, public speaking, and building partnerships to expand clean energy worldwide, I craved a quiet place to call home in the United States. Deerwood Glen seemed ideal. It was a scenic neighborhood featuring gently winding streets, tall oaks, and a modest lake at its center. The homes ranged from cozy cottages to modern two-story houses. Its HOA, from what I'd read, mostly addressed issues like landscaping or trash schedules, nothing I considered alarming. Better yet, the local climate was perfect for solar installations, thanks to abundant sunshine year-round. I was thrilled to integrate solar technology into my new property, a personal demonstration of my lifelong mission to promote renewable energy. On move-in day, a few neighbors greeted me warmly. They seemed like typical suburbanites, retirees tending flower beds, couples jogging with strollers, kids biking. A sense of calm hung in the air, far removed from the corporate whirlwind I normally inhabited. I told myself I'd keep my professional identity discreet. No one needed to know I was a billionaire energy mogul. In everyday life, I prefer to be recognized simply as Sebastian, a friendly neighbor who believed in sustainability. Little did I suspect that an unyielding HOA board member, nicknamed Karen, would soon transform my quiet solar project into a neighborhood-wide power struggle. And she had no idea that her new target, who she viewed as just another homeowner, actually had the resources and influence to challenge her entire anti-solar crusade on a grand scale. Deerwood Glen's move-in process went smoothly, aside from the usual boxes everywhere. I arranged for a local installer, Sunbright Systems, to set up advanced solar panels on my roof, an array that, combined with a small battery storage unit, would cover nearly all my home's energy needs. My plan was to keep the design tasteful and adhere to typical guidelines for a neat look. In many states, HOAs can't outright forbid solar due to support state laws, though some try to impose restrictions on panel placement or aesthetics. Right after scheduling the installation, I started hearing rumors about the HOA's most active board member, Marina Arnold, known privately as Karen. She was in her early 50s, sporting a crisp bob haircut and a preference for formal blouses. Allegedly, she had a knack for policing neighbors on minute code details, distributing violation notices about garbage bins left out an hour late, or about fences she deemed an improper color. That alone didn't overly concern me. Typical overzealousness, perhaps. Then one afternoon, I found Karen outside my newly purchased house, scanning the facade. She asked in a clipped tone, "Are you the owner?" I nodded, introduced myself. She pursed her lips. I saw a contractor sign about installing solar. "We have strict guidelines about exterior modifications. You'll need approval from the HOA board." I replied politely, "Of course, I'll submit the required paperwork. But the state solar rights laws also protect the ability to install panels." She frowned, as though I'd spoken a foreign language. "We prefer a uniform aesthetic. We don't allow large reflective surfaces visible from the street. It may not pass review." I offered a calm smile, pointing out that local regulations generally support solar installations. Karen just sniffed. "Here at Deerwood Glen, we do what's best for everyone, property values especially." She walked away, leaving a subtle sense of confrontation in the air. At that point, I suspected an uphill battle might loom. But I also trusted that state laws would trump any single HOA official's whim. I had no intention of giving up on solar. Still, I decided to keep things civil, at least at first. A week later, the HOA held its monthly meeting at the neighborhood's small clubhouse. Hoping to smooth the process, I attended to present my solar proposal. The turnout was modest. A handful of board members, a few curious residents. Karen presided from a center seat, a stack of documents at her elbow. She gave me a cool nod as I took a seat. During the meeting, Ms. Whitman, an elderly board member with a gentle demeanor, asked me about the solar system's design. I explained how modern panels are relatively sleek, no longer the clunky eyesores of older technology. I also noted the community's potential benefits. My system might feed back surplus power to the grid, effectively reducing local carbon footprint. Neighbors seemed intrigued. Some asked about cost savings or reliability. Karen, however, jumped in with a litany of concerns. Won't the panels reflect sunlight into neighbors' windows? Could they cause higher temperatures on roofs? Possibly lower property values? And the glare might bother drivers. She conjured a swirling list of objections that sounded more emotional than factual. I calmly responded with data from other neighborhoods, showing no negative property effect, no substantial glare issues, and that solar panels typically reduce roof temperatures by absorbing sunlight. Some board members nodded in relief. Karen scowled, retorting, "We have no official study to confirm that." I moved to table this request until we investigate thoroughly. The meeting ended without a formal vote, so I left with my application still in limbo. Ms. Whitman apologized privately, admitting Karen seemed determined to block me. I thanked her, reassuring I'd remain patient. Still, I recognized this might be no ordinary waiting for approval. Karen was clearly on a mission to bury my solar plan. She had no inkling that behind my polite, unassuming exterior stood the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar renewable energy empire who'd spent years championing solar on a global stage. Within days, signs of Karen's broader intentions emerged. Neighbors told me she was circulating a petition to ban visible solar panels in Deerwood Glen. Some were baffled, others intimidated. Karen had a knack for sowing fear. Her petition ranted about ugly black squares, claiming they'd reduce the area's upscale appearance. She also argued solar technology was unproven, ignoring decades of industry advancement. Concerned residents approached me, saying they liked the idea of solar but feared angering Karen. One couple, the Robinsons, quietly revealed they'd also considered panels but held off after hearing about the petition. "We can't risk her harassment," Mrs. Robinson whispered. Another neighbor, Mr. Chun, worried about potential fines. Karen's rumors about punishing unauthorized panels spread quickly. Recognizing my own potential influence, I started gently educating neighbors, emailing them links to fact sheets about solar's benefits, listing other communities that embraced it without property value drops. I offered to answer technical questions, forging a quiet coalition of rational voices. But Karen's fear tactics gained momentum. She posted flyers claiming, "Your house may be unsellable if neighbors cover roofs with these contraptions." Hyperbole soared. I realized I might have to escalate. If Karen convinced enough board members to pass an outright ban, we'd face a multi-layer legal fight. The Homeowners Association usually couldn't override state solar rights statutes, but might cause major delays or intimidation. As a recognized pioneer in renewable energy, I'd always advocated for calm, collaborative solutions. Yet if Karen insisted, I'd bring the full weight of my resources. But first, I wanted to see if reason could prevail within the local system. At the next HOA meeting, Karen officially introduced her solar prohibition motion, a blanket ban on visible roof-mounted panels. The board was stunned. Ms. Whitman stammered that many families want the freedom to choose sustainable energy. Another board member, Mr. De Silva, said this might conflict with state law. Karen scornfully dismissed them, insisting the HOA had supreme authority to safeguard aesthetics. A heated debate erupted. Parents argued that solar was the future, beneficial for the environment, that the ban was regressive. Karen's small clique nodded in agreement with her, spouting fear that too many panels will turn our neighborhood into an industrial zone. I rose to speak, politely pointing out that state legislation explicitly protected homeowners' rights to install solar in most circumstances. She cut me off, stating that doesn't apply if the HOA can show aesthetic detriment. Sensing she might try to manipulate legal loopholes, I decided the gloves might have to come off soon. The meeting ended with no resolution, but Karen claimed she'd move forward with official bylaw amendments to codify the ban. Many neighbors left anxious, me included. Ms. Whitman approached me, whispering, "She's unstoppable when she's fixated." "I'm worried." I assured her we'd find a way. Quietly, I prepared for the possibility of a direct legal battle. My own position as a major figure in renewable energy meant I had top-tier attorneys on speed dial. Yet I didn't want to overshadow local voices by dropping the billionaire CEO bomb. Often, I prefer a grassroots approach, letting the community stand up for itself. But time was running short. If Karen rushed a bylaw that spooked everyone from installing or forced me to tear down my plant array, we'd have a fiasco. The question: how far would she push her anti-solar obsession? While Karen was busy drafting her ban, I pressed on with my personal project. The local solar contractor, Sunbright Systems, was scheduled to install my panels soon. I had city permits in order, and from a purely legal standpoint, I was within my rights. But the HOA's architectural committee, heavily influenced by Karen, hadn't granted final approval. Despite that, given state protections, I felt confident enough to proceed. Legally, an HOA can't unilaterally veto solar in our state, though they can cause red tape. The contractor, upon hearing about the brewing conflict, asked me if I was sure. I said yes. My lawyers confirmed the state law on solar overrides local attempts to ban it. Installation day arrived. The Sunbright team arrived with a truck of panels and equipment. I greeted them, excited. But as they unloaded, guess who showed up? Karen, wearing her typical crisp blouse, face red with indignation. She marched up, shouting at the contractors, "Stop! You have no HOA approval. This violates community standards." The startled workers looked at me. I stepped in, quietly telling them to continue. I confronted Karen calmly, explaining that I was exercising my state-granted right to solar. Karen threatened to call the police. I gave a half-smile, telling her they'll confirm I have the permits. Furious, she pulled out her phone, presumably calling someone. Meanwhile, the crew continued hauling panels onto my roof. She glowered, pacing on the sidewalk. When the police arrived, just a single patrol car, the officer asked for documentation. I provided my official city permit and pointed out the relevant state law about homeowner solar rights. The officer shrugged, seeing no grounds to stop us. Karen fumed, demanded a citation for defying the HOA. The officer politely declined, stating it was a civil matter, not criminal, and for what he saw, I was legally covered. Defeated, Karen retreated, spewing threats of fines. The contractors resumed their work. By day's end, my sleek, modern solar array gleamed on the rooftop, harnessing the sun's power. Many neighbors paused to admire it, complimenting how unobtrusive it looked. But the tension soared. Karen raged that I defied her order, vowing massive HOA penalties. I quietly recorded every threat. My attorneys prepared for potential legal showdowns. The conflict felt personal now. Karen presumably saw me as a direct challenger to her authority. She still had no clue about my global standing in the renewable energy industry, nor how big a fight she was courting. A week later, Karen unveiled her finished ban. Titled The Deerwood Glen Prohibition on Unsightly Solar Apparatuses, it was a 30-page bylaw edition banning any roof-mounted solar array visible from a street. The board meeting in which it was introduced was rowdy, but Karen's allies outnumbered the moderate members, likely due to intimidation or her manipulative tactics. Despite vocal opposition from neighbors, the measure passed by a slim majority vote. Pandemonium erupted after the vote. Some neighbors shouted that the bylaw was illegal under state law. Others wept, worried they'd be forced to remove newly installed panels or never install them at all. Karen crowed about victory for our aesthetic standards, ignoring pleas about the environment or personal energy rights. Ms. Whitman called the measure morally and legally bankrupt. Karen dismissed her. I sat there, face tight with anger, but trying to remain composed. We parted ways that night in high tension. On the community forum, Karen posted triumphantly that all existing solar panels must be removed within 60 days or face daily fines. She singled out my system as a prime example, telling me to uninstall that monstrosity. People were stunned. Ms. Whitman emailed me that the entire board was overshadowed by Karen's unstoppable drive. I wrote back telling her not to worry. I had resources to fight back. Now the lines were drawn. Karen had escalated to passing an official bylaw ban. For me, it was time to reveal who she was really messing with. The next step, launching a robust legal counteroffensive, combined with a high-profile public push, reminding the entire region that solar was not only legally protected, but championed by one of the most prominent players in the global renewable sector. Realizing the matter had ballooned beyond a small HOA spat, I decided to go public. I first gathered my local supporters, neighbors who wanted solar, environmental advocates, even local press. Then I gave an impromptu press conference in front of my house, with the new solar panels shining behind me. Typically, I'm more private, but this time I needed the power of media coverage to highlight Karen's draconian ban. Standing before cameras, I introduced myself as Sebastian Ridgewood, CEO and founder of Greenstar Innovations, a leading global renewable energy company. Journalists were stunned. Many recognized my name from major climate summits. I explained the fiasco, that an HOA official was outlawing solar in defiance of state law, threatening to forcibly remove legally installed panels. I cited the importance of clean energy and the negative precedent if HOAs block it. The story spread quickly, fueled by my global prominence. The press labeled it the Deerwood Glen solar ban versus a billionaire renewables mogul. Within hours, major outlets picked it up. Environmental groups expressed outrage. Social media erupted in condemnation of the HOA's ban. Hashtags like #SaveSolar trended locally. My corporate PR team joined, sharing a statement. Greenstar Innovation strongly opposes any policy restricting homeowners' right to deploy renewable energy solutions. The public reaction was swift. Many ridiculed the HOA for ignoring climate concerns, praising me for standing up. Karen, blindsided, responded with a scathing post on the community forum. She accused me of exploiting the media. But the tide had turned. Even some who previously supported her started to worry about Deerwood Glen becoming the nation's poster child for anti-environment backwardness. Meanwhile, Ms. Whitman told me half the board now regretted passing the ban. They felt duped by Karen's manipulations. I filed an immediate lawsuit seeking an injunction to block the bylaw's enforcement, citing violation of the state solar rights law. My attorneys were top tier. They predicted a swift legal victory. No judge would side with an HOA ban that contradicted established legislation. Yet we needed the public spectacle to ensure Karen couldn't wriggle out with some local loophole. The media attention was our weapon. A preliminary hearing was scheduled at the county courthouse, drawing large crowds. On one side, Karen and a small retinue of supporters who insisted the HOA had the right to define the neighborhood's look. On the other side, me, accompanied by a small army of lawyers and environmental advocates, plus numerous neighbors who opposed the ban. The local station set up cameras outside, capturing the tension. In the courtroom, Karen's lawyer argued the bylaw was not explicitly contradictory to state law because aesthetic grounds were permissible reasons to restrict certain modifications. My lead attorney calmly countered that the state's solar access law unequivocally barred HOAs from imposing outright bans, especially ones that hamper homeowners' ability to generate solar power. The judge listened intently, flipping through the documents. I took the stand briefly, explaining how solar was essential for personal clean energy generation, that these laws existed precisely to protect homeowners from narrow-minded bans. I mentioned my professional expertise in the field. The judge's eyebrows rose. Obviously, my credentials carried weight. Karen, scowling at me from across the room, since this was not the typical HOA dispute. After a day of arguments, the judge announced he'd need time to review, but indicated the ban was likely unenforceable. He granted a temporary injunction preventing the HOA from fining or forcing removal of existing panels until the final decision. The crowd of my supporters cheered. Karen marched out, ignoring reporters. The local news ran highlights, showing me, the Billionaire Renewable's CEO, championing the right to have solar panels in a suburban neighborhood. Public opinion strongly favored my stance. Behind the scenes, I suspected Karen felt cornered. Legally, she had little ground to stand on. Her only recourse was to rely on fear or some cunning twist. But the final ruling seemed inevitable. a major judicial rejection of her ban. The question was how humiliating it would be for her and the HOA. Meanwhile, I kept my newly installed panels shining bright, a quiet testament to unstoppable progress. The story garnered national coverage. CEO fights HOA's solar ban, made for a catchy headline. Environmental groups champion me as a hero, defending homeowners' clean energy rights. Right-wing commentators, in some corners, painted it as a rich mogul imposing his green agenda, but that narrative didn't gain much traction. Overall, the public saw it as an HOA run amok against a proven climate-friendly technology. The solar ban was widely ridiculed. Karen singled out as a misguided Karen figure. Within Deerwood Glen, lines were drawn. A majority of neighbors, including Ms. Whitman, strongly opposed the ban, seeing it as extreme. But Karen's loyal circle held firm, claiming we risked turning the neighborhood into a solar junkyard. The board was in turmoil, with Ms. Whitman leading calls to repeal the bylaw. Yet Karen refused, clinging to legal process, presumably hoping the court might uphold her stance. Tensions soared. Some folks reported receiving anonymous notes urging them not to speak out. Others posted on social media that they feared harassment if they installed panels. The environment turned toxic. Ms. Colt, a moderate board member, publicly apologized for not stopping Karen earlier. She admitted Karen had railroaded them with false claims about legal authority. The board scheduled a special meeting to consider rescinding the ban, but Karen threatened to sue them for violating due process. It was a chaotic, fear-laden environment. Meanwhile, my lawsuit advanced, with a final hearing date looming. My attorneys predicted a resounding victory, so I waited, continuing to provide interviews that hammered home the message. Communities shouldn't be barred from adopting solar. Karen presumably seethed as she saw me on national TV, calmly dismantling every anti-solar argument. She'd launched a personal crusade, not realizing she was tangling with an unstoppable juggernaut in the renewable sector. One afternoon, while I was out for a business trip, my home security system alerted me to a disturbance on the roof. The local police responded, discovering that someone had tried to tamper with a few solar panel mounts, tools left behind, one panel forcibly loosened. My camera footage captured a hooded figure, face unseen, removing screws. The suspect fled when the alarm triggered. If the sabotage had succeeded, the panel might have come loose in high wind, risking property damage or injury. Though we had no direct proof of who did it, neighbors suspected a small radical pro-Karen faction might be behind it, or maybe someone who hated the negative media coverage. The incident outraged me. For a moment, I considered installing additional personal security. The police recommended an ongoing investigation, but we lacked an ID. Regardless, it underscored how vicious the conflict had grown. Ms. Whitman was appalled. Vandalism over solar panels? This is insane. I told reporters about the incident, condemning it as an attack on lawful property and public safety. My condemnation further rallied supporters behind the cause. Even some neutral neighbors realized how destructive Karen's movement had become. Meanwhile, Karen denied involvement, calling it a false flag stunt. Tensions soared further. I remained unshaken. My resolve to champion solar only solidified. At long last, the day of the final court decision arrived. The courthouse was crowded with reporters, environmental activists, curious onlookers, and local residents. Karen arrived in her usual formal blouse, flanked by her lawyer, looking grim. I arrived with my legal team, along with Ms. Whitman and supportive neighbors. The judge read a lengthy opinion. He systematically dissected the HOA's ban, referencing state law that explicitly protected homeowner solar installations from excessive or prohibitive HOA covenants. He concluded that the ban was in direct conflict with well-established solar rights legislation. He also noted the ban was not narrowly tailored, but a blanket prohibition, thus unenforceable. Additionally, he criticized the HOA's intimidation tactics, referencing my attorney's evidence that neighbors felt harassed or threatened. With a stern expression, the judge invalidated the entire bylaw, ruling the HOA must allow solar. Applause and cheers erupted in the gallery. Karen closed her eyes, lips pressed thin in defeat. The judge added that the HOA was liable for my legal fees, given the ban's blatant contravention of state law. He further suggested that if any homeowner faced fines or removal demand for solar, they could sue for damages. My team gave supportive nods. The victory was complete and unequivocal. Karen tried to speak to the media outside, blaming activist judges and a billionaire smear campaign. But reporters hammered her with questions about ignoring state law and fueling sabotage. She fled, overshadowed by the triumphant crowd celebrating the pro-solar ruling. Neighbors approached me with tears of relief. Some planned to install panels themselves. The fiasco had ended, a resounding triumph for sustainability and homeowner rights. The aftermath was swift. The board convened an emergency session to comply with the court order, discarding the ban officially. Ms. Whitman and others pushed forward new guidelines that actively encourage solar adoption, ironically reversing Karen's stance entirely. Publicly, the HOA apologized to me and the community at large for the confusion. They recognized how damaging Karen's vendetta had been. Karen, humiliated, faced calls from neighbors to resign from a board. She refused at first, claiming she was misunderstood. But membership in the HOA board demanded the trust of the community, which she'd lost. A recall vote was scheduled. The vote wasn't even close. Residents, fed up with her divisive, destructive approach, voted overwhelmingly to remove her. Furious, she left, describing the neighborhood as lost to radical green influences. Shortly after, Karen sold her Deerwood Glen home. Rumor said she moved to a different city, presumably to start fresh or to avoid the local scorn. She left behind a legacy of chaos. A tarnished HOA forced to pay legal fees, a row of outraged neighbors, and a renewed sense that attempts to block solar or any progressive measure would be met with strong pushback. With her departure, Deerwood Glen underwent a renewal. The new board restructured policies, encouraging more eco-friendly initiatives, from community gardens to an electric car charging station. Freed from Karen's negativity, neighbors discovered a more harmonious environment. Ms. Whitman expressed relief, remarking, "It's a shame we endured all this strife, but we came out stronger." In the months following the decisive ruling, Deerwood Glen found a new equilibrium. Many residents, inspired by the coverage and my solar array success, explored installing panels themselves. The once intimidated families realized they had legal backing. Sunbright Systems, the local installer, reported a surge in interest from our area. Soon, the rooftops in Deerwood Glen gleamed with new panels, forging a quiet but potent transformation into a more sustainable neighborhood. With Karen gone, the HOA replaced fear-based mandates with a friendly approach. Ms. Whitman led the board, focusing on real improvements, fixing sidewalks, organizing community events, and offering workshops on energy efficiency. I joined in sometimes, leading Q&A sessions on solar financing or new technologies. The neighborhood thrived in an atmosphere of acceptance, forging deeper connections. Parents, seniors, and newcomers all felt a sense of unity that had been missing under Karen's reign. Meanwhile, national media occasionally revisited the HOA versus billionaire solar CEO story, highlighting it as a turning point in the broader acceptance of residential solar. I found it amusing that a simple personal home improvement triggered such a big ripple effect. But as a longtime advocate for renewables, I was glad to see how the entire fiasco had awakened interest in solar. In a sense, Karen unintentionally boosted my cause far more than if I'd quietly installed panels without controversy. One autumn afternoon, while gardening in my yard, a car pulled up. Out stepped Mr. and Mrs. Patterson, my distant cousins from another state. They'd heard about the fiasco through the news, recognized me, and decided to stop by. We embraced, laughing about how the entire world seemed to know my suburban solar drama. They'd always known me as an entrepreneur, but didn't expect me to become the face of anti-HOA activism. I told them the real star was Karen's meltdown, not me. They admired my rooftop panels, praising how seamlessly they blended with the home's design. We sipped iced tea, recalling how we grew up in a small rural town where solar was once unimaginable. Now, we beamed at how far technology and acceptance had come. The moment reminded me that progress sometimes emerges from adversity. Karen's attempted ban ironically advanced local adoption of solar, not hindered it. As time rolled on, more Deerwood Glen homes featured subtle black solar arrays, neatly integrated with roof lines. The sight warmed my heart, like seeds taking root, fueling a new sense of ecological responsibility. The board followed suit by installing a small solar canopy over the clubhouse's parking lot, offsetting electricity costs. The community soared with pride, recognized as a local model for forward-thinking policies. Some neighbors even joked about Karen's parting gift, referencing how her hostility inadvertently inspired a solar renaissance. Beyond that, the legal fees the HOA had to cover were significant, spurring them to reorganize finances. Ms. Whitman secured modest grants from a city clean energy neighborhood program, ironically championed by me in my official capacity. This synergy between my city role and personal involvement in Deerwood Glen gave me a deeper satisfaction. We turned a fiasco into a catalyst for positive change. The vantage point of living in the same neighborhood helped me see the practical impacts of policy. Meanwhile, my global renewable energy empire, Greenstar Innovations, continued forging solar expansions worldwide. Yet the Deerwood Glen story found its way into our corporate presentations. We used it as an example of how local legislation and misguided HOAs can hamper green adoption, but also how determined homeowners, backed by strong legal frameworks, can triumph. My communications team ran an educational campaign about homeowner rights to solar, referencing our success in Deerwood Glen as a blueprint. Local advocacy groups picked up on this momentum, lobbying state legislators to further strengthen solar access laws, removing even small HOA aesthetic exceptions that some boards exploited. Soon, a new amendment was proposed, explicitly banning HOAs from imposing any ban on rooftop solar, reinforcing existing law. I testified at a hearing, explaining how an HOA, like Karen's, nearly suppressed a beneficial technology. The hearing ended with broad support, and the amendment passed. Karen had inadvertently spurred a legislative fix that further empowered homeowners statewide. A year after the final ruling, Deerwood Glen thrived in a post-Karen era. Freed from her negativity, new friendships flourished, and solar panels were widely accepted. The old tension was replaced by block parties, nature walks, and neighborly help. Ms. Whitman was re-elected board president unanimously, credited for healing rifts. I, for my part, remained just Sebastian, the approachable neighbor who occasionally hosted barbecues. Of course, I still ran a massive global enterprise, but here, I simply enjoyed my evenings with new friends. Reflecting on the fiasco, I felt a mix of gratitude and irony. Gratitude because the community overcame pettiness to embrace sustainable living. Irony because without Karen's public meltdown, we might never have achieved such a robust pro-solar stance. Sometimes adversity fosters progress. She had no idea that her crusade awakened a giant in renewable energy. Had she known from the start I was a billionaire CEO, maybe she would have thought twice. Or maybe not. Her arrogance seemed unstoppable. Neighbors frequently teased, "We should put up a statue of Karen to remind us what not to do." We'd all laugh, though a small part of me pitted her, as her misguided illusions destroyed her reputation. Even so, we recognized her fiasco spurred the neighborhood's transformation. So, ironically, she left a strange legacy. Over time, Deerwood Glen's new energy-savvy approach expanded. The board approved more sustainable projects, LED streetlights, a possible community garden, even exploring a small shared solar farm for the common areas. I occasionally offered technical advice, bridging my professional knowledge with grassroots input. The synergy thrilled me. This was the local-level impact I'd always hoped for, complementing my large-scale corporate achievements. At the same time, my kids attended local schools that used solar panels on rooftops, a city initiative I spearheaded as well. The sense of synergy was complete. At home, at work, and in the neighborhood, everything aligned with the principles I championed: clean energy, forward-thinking policy, and community collaboration. Freed from petty sabotage, we soared. Today, Deerwood Glen stands as a shining example of how a neighborhood can transform from an oppressive anti-solar environment into a beacon of modern sustainability. The fiasco, sparked by an HOA Karen who sought to ban solar panels for aesthetic reasons, ended with a decisive legal victory, public condemnation of the ban, and the permanent dethronement of the one who championed it. In a twist of fate, Karen learned far too late that the neighbor she tried to strong-arm was actually a billionaire renewable energy CEO, well-positioned to protect his personal solar array and the rights of every homeowner to embrace clean energy. No longer does fear overshadow the desire to harness the sun's power. At Deerwood Glen, rooftops sparkle with new solar arrays, a testament to resilience. The once skeptical board members, chastened by the legal meltdown, wholeheartedly support green initiatives. The entire fiasco, while initially stressful, ironically propelled the community into the spotlight as a success story, proving that a determined homeowner, backed by strong legal protections, could defy and ultimately topple even the most obstinate HOA decrees. As for Karen, her misguided cause ended in disgrace. She departed the neighborhood, leaving behind a legacy of cautionary tales about the folly of ignoring progressive state laws and public sentiment. Meanwhile, my home stands proudly with state-of-the-art solar panels, symbolizing the unstoppable wave of renewable energy adoption. Neighbors regularly thank me for helping them discover the benefits of solar and for championing their rights against intimidation. To me, though, it was simply an extension of my lifelong mission, ensuring that misguided restrictions don't hamper the world's shift to clean, sustainable power. And so Deerwood Glen's story concludes with a happy ending. The ban destroyed, solar thriving, the HOA reformed, and a once-divided community reunited in the warmth of the sun's rays, forging a future that's brighter both literally and metaphorically.